A very good afternoon to everyone. So, today we have with us all the way from Perth, Australia, Mr. Smarjeet Mahapatra, sir. He is the engagement manager of Tata Consultancy Services and he's working on an assignment at an oil and gas corporate there. After doing his graduation in electrical engineering, Smarjeet sir went on to complete his PGDM from IMDR and he is a pass out of our 2003 to 2005 batch. After completion of his PGDM, Sir's first assignment was with Synergy. It is a Singapore based multinational organization. He joined there as a business consultant, and after a 2.5 years of stint there, in 2007, he moved on to take up position of a project manager in TCS, where he continues till today. A rare feat in itself nowadays, where people jump jobs every 2 to 3 years. In 2007, at TCS, he was entrusted with the responsibility of engagement manager, and he was located at Perth, Western Australia, for an oil and gas organization there. He is also responsible for a wide range of activities in his current assignment, like stakeholder management, sales and capex projects, etc. In all his KPIs, he has been a consistent achiever and a grand performer. His profiles brings him out as a highly determined and a result-oriented professional. He has proven ability to maintain close client contacts, which is an important factor for developing strategic solutions. Also, he comes across as a project management professional with experience in successfully leading. So, Smarjeet sir is a manager with excellent interpersonal skills, an aspect which perhaps has been a major contributor in his career ascent. Sir will share with us the experience and learning touch points from his 15 years of illustrious corporate career, and I'm sure we all can immensely benefit from it. We all are very eager to listen to you, sir. Over
Yeah,
to you, Smarjeet, sir.
thank you so much. So just wanted to give a brief experience of myself, what I have done before that. So as you correctly pointed out, I am a 2005 pass out from IMDR. So while many of you not know that stint, so while I passed out of IMDR, I did a 3 month stint in the first company called Crompton Greaves PPI. So that's the insulation wing of Crompton Greaves. So because I thought, it's more of industrial experience, it fit into the, engineering and MBA thought of that. So that was a brief stint I did for 3 months. It gave me a good idea of what not to do in my life and what should be my focus. Then I moved to Synergy. So Synergy is basically a Philadelphia-based company. It deals with incentive compensation and sales, performance software and consultancy. So there I had the privilege to work in Wyeth Pharmaceuticals. So it gave me an experience of how the pharma industry does. Wyeth Pharmaceutical is one of the top 5 largest pharmaceutical companies in the world. Uh, Gave me an understanding of what a pharma research looks like, what does a pharma domain looks like, how pharma sales strategies are driven. Gave me an opportunity also to work in Philadelphia, where the company headquarters are there. So it was a first on-site trip for me and also an eye-opener in terms of how pharma and IT can work together. I joined 2007 October TCS. So I moved from TCS. My first posting was not in Mumbai as it was hoped. It was in Saudi Arabia, Riyadh. So I stayed in Saudi Telecom for 4 years, from 2007 to 2009. So it was the Saudi Telecom project, one of the largest projects in TCS history, where we built the entire CRM and billing implementation for Saudi Telecom. One of the still continues to be one of the largest clients of TCS, the Saudi Telecom. From there, I moved to Mexico and Puerto Rico for a stint in America Mobile. So America Mobile at that time was owned by Carlos Slim. You must have heard about him. He was the richest man at that point. Even Bill Gates was number 2. So in his company, there was one of the strategic initiatives, and acquisitions he had was Puerto Rico Telecom. So I worked in Puerto Rico Telecom, where the on-site was in Puerto Rico, San Juan. It's part of America, USA, but the entire speaking language is Spanish because it is part of Cuba, which was taken over by America. And then I was back in Mexico for another 6 month stints. So that was the project. When I left that, I moved to British Telecom, Ipswich, England. I was there for, between that and Mumbai was the offshore for 2 years. After that, I joined the Celsi account, which is in South Africa, Johannesburg, where I did a stint for 5 years from 2014 to 2019. So I was in Johannesburg, South Africa, for Celsi. Celsi is the third largest telecom company in South Africa market, over a 20 million subscriber base over there. And from there, I moved to Perth in last year to join this oil and gas company known as Woodside, which is one of the largest oil and gas producer companies in this. So one of the key questions I hope my journey has told you is the reason that I am able to stay long in this company, because I have been able to move from different geographies, different clients, different technologies, different kind of domains. So every time when you start from scratch, it's like joining a new company, having new teammates, having new clients, having new challenges. So this is something which gives you a new, what you can say, initiative to learn, to improve, to know about the world. And that also gives you an opportunity to grow as a career, as a professional, how you can grow. So this is the brief journey that I had. And the roles that I did was not only I started as a business analyst, I moved as a solution architect, then I did project management, then I moved into delivery management, now it is engagement manager. So different roles I have played at different points of time based on the project's requirements. Last 4-5 years, as you correctly pointed out, I have been working as an engagement manager with key KPIs being delivery and sales. So that is something that I have been doing for different clients. So this experience has given me some insights of how different parts of the world works, how different industry works, because I have industry knowledge in telecom, I have industry knowledge in pharma, I have some knowledge now past 1 year because I have been done in oil and gas about how industry domain operates. So that is in short what I have gone through in my last 15 years. It has been quite a rich and varied experience. So as we go on, what I would like is, and what Shruti was asking is, as I go through the points, if you feel anything, let us have an open interaction rather than me just discussing some points. We can have a proper question and answer session maybe at the end, but let us have an open session where we can discuss, if you feel that I need to elaborate any point, we can talk through. So the first point I just wanted to discuss was the COVID situation in Australia and what Australia as a geo has been doing and how it has been doing. Now, the first thing to know about here is, fortunately in Australia, the density of population is very less. So essentially it is around 23.5 million is the density, total population of Australia. So now if you take that population and see the size of Australia, Australia is roughly this 2 to 2.5 times the size of India as a geography. So Mumbai population is close to 20 million. So that kind of spread across that geography makes it the density of population is quite less. Second of all, it's quite an advanced economy in terms of digitization. So almost everything is digitized. Everything, whatever initiatives we are now launching in India to have that PAN drives, having a single identified number, all those have been done here some time back. So every individual has a digital profile, and that is being mapped by the organization, by the governments. So money transfer, all those items become much more easier. The third way, as an important thing that we need to know about Australia is, Australia has a very, very low unemployment rate. Traditionally, it's 5 to 6%. So majority of them are employed, and there are more opportunities that used to happen, and lesser number of individuals staying in the organization in this country. So there was highly skilled immigration happening, and it is still continuing. Now COVID has put a dampener where a lot of people from Southeast Asia, including India, used to migrate here in search of jobs. So in this regard, Australia is one of those countries which was better equipped to handle the COVID situation. So what they also did was, the way in which they drove, the entire strategy of the government worked. So it was driven by the chief medical officer. So he was, if you have seen some, you can also watch on YouTube. Whenever the prime minister was giving a statement, he was directly flanked by the chief medical officer. So first time in a breach in a protocol where you do not have other members of state, but the medical board was what is driving the strategies of how it should happen at the state, complete nation level, in fact. So that made it very, very clear what from a medical hospital and health policies should be dictated. They also had a very clear vision of what they wanted to do. So they knew that the bulk of the risk lies at the lowest or the per capita income of the lowest per capita income. So they increased it. So for example, the unemployment wages that people who are unemployed over here get is $700 around for 14 days for a period. That's bi-weekly period. So that's a monthly income of $1,500, and that's not bad here. So typically the income over here for employment is $5,000 to $6,000. So unemployment people used to get up to $1,500. They made it double immediately, day one. So that became $3,000. And they made the first month and 2 months of deposits in each of the bank accounts. And then they started the lockdowns. So everyone at that time had the money in their bank accounts, in their cards, and everyone uses a card here, digital money. So it was much more easier to actually enforce the lockdown that happened. They did make some slip ups. The slip up happens when people were coming from abroad, especially they landed, some of the ships and cruises that were happening. When they landed, they brought in some COVID cases. But as of yesterday, if I can quote the figures, it was 10,800 was the total number of cases in Australia. And out of which there were 113 deaths and 8,036 have already recovered. In Western Australia, where Perth situation, for the last 3 months, that is 90 days counting today, we have 0 COVID cases in the community. There are 8 cases and all of them have been caught at the border while people trying to enter and they are in quarantine. So essentially there is no community cases in the last 30 days, which is a very great scenario to have. And in Perth, we have everything open for the last 2 months. So I think in April, it all opened up. So we have regular offices, regular classes, everything is going on at regular thing. Yes, the enforcement of 2 meter spacing and all those safety hygiene rules still apply. But apart from that, everything is open. The businesses, the colleges, the schools in Western Australia, everything is open. And for 90 days, there have been no COVID cases. So that is quite good, pretty good management, I would say, by the Western Australia Premier and as well as the Australian government as a whole to maintain COVID scenario. So I'll just pause a bit and do you have any questions on how Australia is coping up or anything, or can we go into other parts? Okay. So let us, then go how the COVID has impacted the Australian, economy as a whole. So yes, there has been some impact on the economy. And one of the largest issues that what has happened over here is the Australia-China relationship have also changed a bit. And to quote, China is the largest trading partner for two-way trading partner for Australia. So they have around a 235 billion trade annual trade relationship. Out of that, the major trade goes from Australia: iron ore, coal, LNG. The second biggest export is the Chinese, and is the education system of Australia. So that gets a lot of revenue from China because a lot of Chinese students come here. Third is tourism, and fourth you have like meat and wine and other parts. So it's quite a big market over there. That has strategically changed because of this COVID, and you must be knowing that Quad strategy that is going on about US, Australia, Japan, India pairing up. So that Australia-China impact, that is a hit that has taken with China. Last what we have heard is though US does not raised on those core ones, it has raised the tariffs on the barley. They have banned meats and beef, and they are raising the tariffs on wine. So there are some kind of impact that is happening. Second, the job losses. Yes, there have been major job losses. So for that, the government has put in, 259 billion fiscal package to help, the job market. There are different levels at which, subsidies are being given. Like if you want to buy a house right now, you are getting a one-time, grant of 55,000 from this, government of Australia, so that you can buy yourself a new infrastructure or other parts, simply to get more money into the market.
Smarjit, can I come in for a minute?
Sure.
Smarjit, this relationship, or rather the change in relationship with China,
right.
Has it triggered any, or has it encouraged any domestic industry within Australia to find replacement to Chinese imports?
It is okay. I'll tell you what the issue is. Let us go back to time. Chinese is not over here a kind of trade relation. Okay, so Chinese is deeply embedded now in Australia. So in all the schools, even my daughter goes to the government school of Australia. Chinese is a mandatory language that every Australian is learning. So there is a deep cultural tie-up also that has happened.
Okay.
So it is not that it is just a trade relationship. It is now a very, very close socio-economic partnership as well. It is not going to be that easy, even from the side of China or Australia, to start taking punitive measures in this regard.
Okay.
There, the Chinese majority of the second language here in Australia is Chinese. As I showed you, in schooling we learn Chinese. Everyone has to learn Mandarin. That is, the population. If you see the chart, Chinese comes very, very high. The entire education system in Australia, the foreign education system, 50 to 60% are Chinese students. One more figure I wanted to quote was, the highest tourism that happens in Australia is from China. So last year there was 1.4 million Chinese travelers or visitors coming from China. So it is not going to be that easy to remove. And for fortunately for Australia, we are not importing much from China. In fact, we are exporting much. So the tariff is more on the ball is on that court that China will start hitting us. So out of that 235 billion, 160 million odd is exports from our side. So hardly 80, is imports, and that too non-important. That can be facilitated from everywhere. It is how badly we will be hit if they start using punitive measures.
Oh, it's the other way around.
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
So that is what this has been. So,
sir.
Yes.
Can I interrupt? I would like to ask a question.
Sure.
Regarding education system, like I am amazed to listen to you that China is almost very close to Australia, right? Right. In this particular situation, right, as you said that many Chinese people come to study in Australia,
right?
What is the medium of instruction for Chinese students? Is it English or Mandarin?
It's English, of course, English. It is English. So, just to add to facts to that, last year 205,000, that is, to around 2.5 lakhs people have come over here from Chinese. So they use Mandarin. They use English as a medium. Why they want to use Mandarin over here is they want to expand their threshold in China. So it's the reverse that is happening. So now China has made quite an impact into Australia. They are able to reach everything because Chinese people, nowadays have a global, they are good in English. Well, let us be fair. They haven't started, they have made that, what you can say, practice, started that initiative some 20, 30 years ago. Now people from China speak pretty good English in my experience. So it is now, if you want to reach the Chinese market, then you need to start learning Mandarin. Because that is the largest economy in the world. So that is the why the Mandarin has come in. And also other part is because the Mandarin people are over here and the Chinese people that is high over here. That is why the Mandarin, is being taught in schools. As what you can say, socio-economic, cultural tie, kind of tendency. So that is why they have introduced Mandarin over there. Does that answer your question, Abhijit?
Yes, sir. Second, I have one more question. Like the Australian government don't have any fear that like in other countries where China has given a lot of loans, right? And then they are demanding there, like in Pakistan or Iran or Sri Lanka, right? In terms of giving loan and then creating a pressure of buying the land or changing the strategies towards India, like that is the geopolitics that happens there. Is it there in Australia, that kind of scenario?
No. The simple reason is there is no loan here, right? We are talking of trade here. So there is
Trade.
no loan. Yeah. So trade is simply, when we are having sale and getting money from them. So there is nothing China can do other than stopping that, which can have an economic impact, but it cannot have, there is no loan that is coming from China, which is driving money in Australia. This itself is a very rich nation. So, it doesn't want the money to happen. What it happens is, it is one of the premium buyers of, iron ore, simply because, most industries are there in China. So iron ore, petrol or LNGs is being sold over there. But I am pretty sure if China is not buying that, those are global commodities. They will eventually find a buyer somewhere. It is a matter of inconvenience, rather than something that is going to happen. So that way, these guys are very, are covered. They are not taking any loan from China.
Oh, means their economy is quite safe, right? Even if there is a socio-cultural.
Yeah, socio-cultural. The only thing is economy will go for a toss because 160 billion of trade, it will not be easy to replace quickly. The case that is happening between Malaysia and India about palm oil, right? So it is not that Malaysia will not be able to sell palm oil, but it will have an impact in the immediate economy. It will not be able to find a buyer who will take 160 billion worth of USD goods suddenly. So there will be some economic impact, of course, but there is nothing that is a trade or a bilateral relation. It's not a matter of loan or any pressure. So that will not work here.
Last question that is related to again education. Like we are now in the mode of online education in India, right? And you said that in the April itself they have opened up, like in Australia. And, did the classroom teaching start? Means like the traditional method, right? Face to face.
Yes. So okay. Yes. Continue the question.
And what kind of care did they take in this? Suppose they started with the traditional method.
Okay, see what happened was they did quite a big controversy over here in Australia. They did not close these schools for long, so there was a lot of demand, including myself and everything. Why did not they close the school immediately in February when it started? So there were two things that they told. One, at that time, once they have sealed the borders in Australia itself, the number of COVID cases were very less. They still less. Second, school has a separate, mentally or a separate importance over here in Australia and in many other countries. Here, it is not a medium of education. It is also a medium of child care for parents. So suppose both parents are in healthcare, then the school time is where they can go into their work and they come back, and the child stays there. So if you are stopping school, then one of those carers or one of those frontline professional will also stop going to work because it is not possible for them. So that is another socio consideration that you need to have while taking those strategic decisions. The third, when they really embarked on that, this organization, this country itself has a very good digital platform. In normal time, when my daughter is quite small, she's in grade 3. Much before COVID, in the normal years also, they have their online portal where every education, all their assignments are done via the digital portal. I'm sure in India it is happening now. So classroom has no homework or assignments being. They do not do any assignments or any homework in the classroom. All assignments are done via portals and uploaded that. So they simply extended that model. So from February to April, everything was in digital mode, where the teachers also came online, even for grade 3 and all those people. and the entire happened. In April, when actually they started doing, it was implemented state-wise. So in some states, closed, schools are still closed, like in Victoria and other parts. In Western Australia and Perth, because they had a 90-day cycle where there was nothing. At that time, it was 60 when they opened the schools in April, I think. They opened up the schools because there was no community transmission. Having said that, in school also they have enforced, a lot of hygiene and cultural changes. These schools are pretty also. Other thing is, again, the density of students in the school are classrooms are very less. So around 20 or 22 for classroom, and they're placing seat placements are pretty far apart. They used to adhere to the 1 point. They still adhere to the 1.5 meter rule. Plus, hygiene matters. Their line of reasoning and thinking was, if there is no community spread, it will not be possible to spread it through the schools. And if you stop the schools, then the healthcare professionals, the frontline workers, the security agencies will also be not able to do it. So that is the reason, there was quite a significant policy and thought process that happened on the schooling system and the education system. It has not yet opened everywhere in Australia still now.
Okay. Okay, sir. Only point I did not understand is that what is the relation of for child and parent in case of schooling, like healthcare workers? I
Yeah.
did not get it.
Okay.
I did not get it.
Okay. So what happens is, here, the family, what happens is, all of them, healthcare workers and parents, where they are working, both of them are working. The child stays at school from 7 to 5 o'clock in the daytime, and that is where the parents go for their work, which is in the hospitals or in that. So the moment you take out a child and make him sit at home for days and months, one of the parents will have to stay back, right? It is not possible for both of them to go out with the child staying at home. So that severely dented their ability to, fight COVID or have those frontline workers, because that is how it is. The entire system works. As I told you, it is not just an education system; it is also a child care system for them. So if the child care is also shut down, then it would be extremely difficult. Actually, they did that. They shut down the schools on February, but they still allowed those parents whose both father and mother were working and in frontline work, for those students to come to school for 30 days, and they were taught frontline classroom teachings where our daughters or sons can sit at home and do it. So they did that parallel run also for 30 days. So that lot of strategic thinking had got into this decision.
Yes, very good, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, Avjit. Parikshit, I see that.
Smara, hi, Parikshit here. It's so good to see you after a long time.
Yes, sir.
Smara,
good to hear your voice. Can't see you, but good to hear your voice.
Hold on a second. I think I should be visible now. Yeah.
Yes, sir. You are visible now.
Thank you. Smara, I wanted to ask you regarding the balancing of the trade part that you mentioned. I think Australia is relying on Japan and US for, or at least that is the sense that that is given in India, that Japan and Australia are offsetting the trade imbalance that may be caused by losing out on the Chinese market for Australia. The US, Japan, and India being the third partner. I think a lot of Indians, just like the Chinese, also go to Australia for studying in various universities, and they are also offered to, settle there, because the population in Australia is relatively very less compared to the land size, and they need educated professionals there. So what are your thoughts on that, or what is your experience?
Yeah, a good question, sir. Actually, I'll tell you the reason. If you understand, though they are saying that education forms part of their trade, but if you see, the major chunk of the trade comes from LNG and coal and iron ore. So I know Japan can offset, and even American can offset that. But if you understand that LNG especially LNG is not something which can be easily, transported. The lines of communication, how transportation of LNG gas is done, is a story in itself. For the past 1 year, I have been trying to understand that. Those are different challenges. So it is not possible that some person we can quickly change an LNG supplier from one person to one country to another country. There, the supply chain logistics, the transportation, how the storage is going to happen, what will be the consumable quantities, those are very important. One, if I just can take a moment and tell you, uh, anyone has a wild guess, now that you know that in petrol and oil gases, oil prices have gone down. Any reason that you feel that why these guys are not uh, stockpiling those things, and they are trying to give barrels at a cheaper rate? Why they are not stockpiling? Any ideas? Any wild guesses?
Currently, the supply could be much more than the demand, and with OIC and other players in picture, I mean, you never know the volatility of the prices. It could go even further down. In
Right.
fact, for a brief period, they were offering money for someone to buy the fuel so that
Right.
the ship, that the container ship stuck at the ocean could be
Right.
emptied out.
Right. A good point, sir. But actually, that is the outcome of what is the problem. The problem is you cannot stop production of gas or pipelines. So the entire production of oil and LNG is built on that premise that I will have the highest production possible. It is not possible to slow down production. There is, in fact, no processes built in the entire world which can slow down your gas or petrol production. The only company which does is one American company, that also it's a POC. It is not possible to slow down. Now, if you are unable to slow down gas production, how will you store gas? The storage space, how it will happen? So there is a severe risk. So there, even if the price goes down, someday they will offer you money to take, but they cannot stop the production without shutting down the entire assets. So therein lies the problem of what I just wanted to highlight on that part. When we go into the oil and gas, I'll give you a much more broader overview of why it is facing challenges in this time. But to understand that, Parikshit sir, the education, the tourism, the iron ore can be done. For the LNG, and that would be a challenge because they will need to quickly find a partner who will immediately replace it. So it will be offshored definitely, but it is not something which can be done. Having said that, this the pain will be much more on the Chinese side. It will also be not easy for them to find a partner who can quickly give them that kind of LNG, petrol, and all those supply. Even if, because even if they are taking the petrol from iron ore or no from other countries, LNG supply will not that be easy. That will require substantial investment and planning. So
That's a very interesting conundrum of demand and supply. So even the supplier as well as the consumer both are in trouble if the production stops.
yes.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
production stop, yeah, this is a very good point you have raised. Not people try to dive into that, but production stoppage meaning you have to shut down the glass plant. So it is shutting down of assets. That is something we are
Yeah.
trying to do. We are going to, and if you shut down an asset, you cannot reopen it that easy. So it is something, quite a big challenge these companies or ONG companies are facing, and that is why uh, the bigger is the pockets, which is of the OIC. They have much bigger pockets. They have much bigger reserves of money that they have. They can keep on fighting the war. Not many people or not many organizations in oil and can keep fighting this war. They will bend over eventually and give at a lower rate. So that is something that is what. But that's a very good.
Another,
Yes, sir. Tell me.
yeah. Another aspect I wanted to know from you is, see, India is a consumer hungry country, and natural resources are limited that way.
Right.
Uh, Australia sits on huge natural resources.
Right.
So sometime last year or year and a half before, Adani had planned some coal mines, purchase of some coal mines in Australia,
Right.
and somehow I'm not sure if it worked out. There were, I think, there were some legal hurdles also. So, how do you see India-Australia trade balance at the moment?
It is not much, to be very frank. It can be improved much better. I'll tell you what the issue is, and that issue Adani has been. So in Australia also there is a lot of challenges. Okay, so Australia politics, if you want to go into the geopolitics a bit, the entire one over here, like American natives, American Indian natives were there. Here we have Aboriginals who are the proper prime Australian citizens. The rest all are from UK and other countries who have. So the land over here officially belongs to the Aboriginals or the tribes. So when the Australian government takes it from them, it officially has to take their permission, and in demand of that, they give them lot, they give them income, they give them housing, they give them everything. So in fact, majority in Western Australia are Aboriginal lands which has been taken over by the government. So there are huge pockets in Australia itself, as you correctly pointed out, where no one is doing the mining and it has rich in iron ore. The opportunity will come is that Australia is currently is not hungry for business partners. Whatever it is getting is more than enough that for this economy. It is a question when the economy will balance out. So let me try to give an example. It may or may not be right. They are still not running on full steam. It is not required for them to run at full steam. Whatever limited capabilities they are running at, maybe at 50-70%, they are getting ample. So the government has ample money, the people are living an abundant lifestyle. So for India, it is the reverse. So if we have something, India can be some of the exporter in some what you can say plus things. We should not be trying to get into the natural or consumable goods. If we are giving some higher level, like let me take a bad example. Let us say selling here a yogic lifestyle, maybe something we will find, or something of those sorts, where these guys are not traditionally in that market at all, or they're not looking into that. That will be something intellectual capabilities. That is why Indian IT companies are striving and making very good here. Intellectual capabilities, highly skilled, whatever things that cannot be produced there. That is where we will find a market in here. Here from Australia, whatever we are looking in India, we will find for raw materials a trade partner. So India can be a consumer for Australian goods. Currently, for Australia to become a consumer, we are dealing more in spices, all those items. Majority of them, those markets are there because these guys are not in need of any critical items which they lack.
That's a very interesting perspective you put forward. Thank you, Smaran.
No, but Parikesh sir, between you and me, that is the limited knowledge also I have. I am not an expert on the geopolitics, but this is what on the ground we have been seeing actually. And that is what as a company in TCS we are struggling. These guys are quite self-sufficient. They are, and that is why even in the IT field, though we are big over here, it is a fraction of what is there in Australia, in America, and in other parts. It is not that these guys do not have that kind of money. In fact, they have much more big, larger pockets. The question is, they are self-sufficient. They are not on a rapid growth path. They are not hungry for expansion. In those cases, to build a transformation case for us is also quite difficult.
That is true. Is the why growth is relatively slower in Australia or European markets?
That is something I am not very sure why it is what is there, because see what happens over here is they if you know the ones behind that, currently I am working in some place that is called the $1 billion street. So where Rio Tinto, Woodside, these are all $1 billion companies now. In 2014 that street was not so named. So that is a bust, that boom that has happened in 2015-16, where they started hitting those petroleums. So right now what is happening is they have become $1 billion. So they have got so much growth in the last few years that it was unprecedented. So based on that, now this growth, they are already on a high growth path. So without doing any substantial changes to their economy or doing any radical transformation, they have gotten this growth path. Now is the time for the last 1 to 2 years that they have been looking for ways to improve their growth, because the last 4-5 years we have been self-sustaining growth because of those companies boom. Rio Tinto, Woodside, they just literally boomed because of those exploration and what they did, whatever gas explorations and whatever new things they found. So the economy took a boom because of that. Now that they are going to stand out, last few years they were last 2-3 years they are looking for ways to improve their economy when COVID stuck. So now it is more about COVID management, and maybe after that, and since this is going to be the new norm for some time, there is going to be innovative strategies that is going to come definitely. So anything else on that?
Yes.
Yeah. So anything else, or can we move on?
I think you can move on.
Yeah. So basically, so this gives an overview of what Australia has been going through and how they have been doing. Again, as I pointed out with those numbers, there is not much that is going to happen. Because the borders have been sealed. They are doing management. The cases are 10,000. It will definitely, seeing the cycle of things that is happening over time, we will have definitely some cases shooting up, because as per the current trends, what is showing, it is 2025 is the linear curve that they are looking, where COVID may have some kind of slump. But before that, there is definitely going to be, it is going to be ebbs and highs, but it is not going to go down. So by that time, but for now, Australia is in a much better position, let us say, than other parts of the world. So it is quite, and Western Australia is having a better position. So COVID is not making that kind of impact in the health domain. Yes, in the economic and other parts, definitely, but that is what the current situation is there in Australia. So the second point I just wanted to let everyone, and I already touched a brief when I was talking to Parikshit sir about how oil and gas companies are facing it. So there have been double impact. One, there is a price war going on, as Parikshit sir correctly pointed out, and second is the COVID impact. So COVID impact, how does it impact on oil and gas? So oil and gas, the major impact that they fared was not the employees are there. It is in the mining operations. So if there is a single COVID case in the mining operations, or on the gas platforms, or on the oil platforms, or in the oil refinement factories, it would be impossible. Meaning, and without having that, you would have to shut down the plant. There is no other way. So if there is no because those industries are not normal industries, they are highly advanced industries where already 90% of the processes are automated and digitized. The 10% that are there in control mechanisms. Without those people being there, it is impossible to run an industry, especially in the mining operations and everything. So that is where the COVID struck a balance. They did a roster, they slowed down their resource, they did a capability split of having resource teams, that so that not everyone can be down. They tried their best, but that is what something that happened. Woodside itself as a company, if you know, is one of the largest oil and gas production companies in the world, in Australia and also in the world. So here technology has a very key role, and technology, I do not mean software or IT services. It is technology in the field of exploration, mining, in refineries, those kind of technology. So they did something quite dramatic, which I was we did not play a part, but I got to saw it. So in the first, this is the first in the world that Woodside, what they did remote ops. So now remote ops normally means you control, the control panel remote. What they did was they did the digitized version of a remote op. So a plant in Karatha was being managed by a remote ops center over here in Perth, which was kind of great to see what technology has given us as an edge. But having said that, they are still facing issues. As I pointed out, productions cannot be slowed down. We are still getting those gases. So what is going to happen? So they have taken a very conservative look at the economy, and their cost-cutting measures are in place. So the entire what catch 22 situation that we have over here is the entire production mechanism, the maintenance mechanism, the reliability mechanism in ONG company is to boost production and have the maximum. Now they have been told to find innovative ways to slow down production so that the losses can be minimized. How and what they are going to do is something that they have been challenging themselves every day. They are trying to find innovative solutions to that. It has not been done that successful, but they have definitely slowed down a bit. That we can see the production, daily production report has gone down. But it is not something that the goal that they were looking for. There is still a long way to do. The end game of that, if the prices do not increase, is they will have to shut down assets. So when you shut down assets, it is not only assets, it is assets, removing pipelines. The gas refinery will have the storage. It is a massive infrastructure and one-way cross. And it is not that you just switch off. You can just switch it off. You will have to slow down till the gases comes. The level goes down to safety. It is a whole like a what you can say complex process of shutting down. And once you shut down, it is not that easy to recover. Open it up again. So that is something that oil and gas companies are facing here, especially from the Woodside lens, I can see. So quite challenging times for them. The good thing is technology is coming to the help more often than not. Some very, very innovative solutions are being discussed here. It is quite a privilege to be hearing that, though it is not that we are playing a major role in that. It is being driven by the organization itself, but quite good experience for all of us. So that is where having said that, I just wanted to share yesterday's, just going through it. So as per the response conditions, this is something that Woodside CEO had given a business report yesterday. And what they are saying is changes to the Woodside work plan resulting in approximately 50% reduction in forecast. So they want to revise it by 50% forecast of the total expenditure that they are building. So total expenditure in terms of employees, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of capex project, which is capital expenditure projects, they want to reduce it by 50%. So the kind of outlook that they have, you must be imagining. They want to review all non-committed activities in Woodside, and approximately 60% reduction in investment expenditure. So they are gearing up for tough times, and this is an indicator of how if this is what the CEO and the top management is saying, then this is what a clear indication of what the industry is going to go through. So things are not looking quite good. And the last one, though very smallly written, it says Woodside's production guidance remains unchanged. This simply means they have been unable to slow down the production, though they have been desperately trying to do that. So these are tough times for oil and gas industries. I am sure when we come out of the other side, it will be much more better for us. We will have more control of what we do as an industry. But this is what it is. So this has led to two new things, and I am sure people like you, who are looking in industries, hydrogen and ammonia. So have we, got some idea of how hydrogen and ammonia they are planning to use as fuels? So that is something that is being going on sometime, and Woodside wants to play a part in that. Ammonia is something that can immediately make an impact. So ammonia is also produced when you are having LNG gas production. Normally, this kind of residual ammonia used to be removed. Now it can be stored. So the idea behind that is, if you have huge furnaces and when you are burning, if you use ammonia in the correct proportion, your carbon footprint will be reduced. So that is the good takeaway. So for doing that, in Japan, there is already JERA, if you have heard of the company, they are already trying that out. So if that becomes a success, then ammonia can be one of the ones which can be something which can be a kind of revenue generation or an alternate sales source for the LNG company. So that is something that is going on. And of course, it has it will not increase or decrease in production capacity, but it will definitely adhere the carbon footprint, which is one of the key goals of all large scale production companies nowadays. The second is hydrogen. It can be used as an alternative source of fuel. The problem with hydrogen is hydrogen cannot be stored, it cannot be transported, it cannot be worked on in the normal capabilities because it's a very small molecule. And how it works, the containment process, the entire supply chain process will have to be revisited. It requires huge capital expenditure. Currently only POCs are going on that. Some of the fuels in cars and etc. they are trying to do, but that will not work out. If you want to do large scale, it will require subsequent investment, but that is something that is going to happen soon. Maybe in the 2025 timelines, you may see some impact of that. So that is something that is happening on the oil and gas. I just wanted to give an idea of things. Any questions on this? Okay.
So excuse me, I would like to ask one question. Like in India, hello, am I audible?
Yes, I am. Yes, you are.
In India, we have this Bombay High is there,
Right.
where oil exploration takes place. Right? What is your opinion about their technology? Is it matching with the world class, or are we still in 50s?
Abhijit, we can do a lot of things. It is not possible for us to compare technologies because technology is something only the organization itself will do. Having said that, the technology in which the way in which the extraction happens, the exploration happens, remains the same. If you have better technologies, then your exploration scale, how you do the exploration, your process gets improvements. So essentially, there is a process in oil and gas, which is called deferment. So what is deferment? Deferment is the losses. So essentially, when you start, it is all controlled by flow meters. So you have flow meters at everywhere, which says, okay, this much pressure, so 100 cubit of pressure has come at the input, 90 is the cubit at output. So 10 has been lost. It can be lost to faulty valves. It can be lost. If you, what you can say, reduce the deferment process or the losses process, then the more productions will happen. So it would depend on the process and how the process is being maintained, that would happen. So for me to comment on how Mumbai High has technology or not, or the process is automated, it would require some deep insight of how it is working. Having said that, fortunately, my elder brother is in the business here, but he's not in the business of that. He's the business of transporting. He owns the ship transportation from Bombay High to the gases. They have a fairly good process from what I understand from him. But it is not possible for me to comment the technology, the benchmark that is being done over here. Here, if you want from the outside perspective, they have very high standards. In fact, one of the things that I will talk about when I go to the IT, they are visualizing a digital factory or a smart plant, it is called. So essentially, it is like having a gamer zone where you can insert and you can see a digital layout in your vision of AI cameras, and you can do that. So these guys are pretty much forward. It would depend. It will also depend on the kind of profits you are making and where would the profits be. Since Woodside is a privately owned company, it has that kind of buffer to invest. Maybe if you are having a government-owned entity, you may not have that because there may be different other considerations. It would also depend on the amount of expenditure you are spending in all this. So I'm sorry I cannot do that comparison, but I hope you got some pointers on how it operates.
Yes, sir. Yes. Thank you.
So any other points? Or I think we can move. So hopefully I have given you some idea of how Australia is operating, how Woodside is operating. Now we will come to our bread and butter, which is IT, how IT is operating. In the IT bucket, let me first tell what TCS has been doing. I'm sure many of you have been following TCS and would be interested in TCS, what it is doing. One of the key things that TCS does and which we are extremely proud as employees is our CSR, which is the corporate social responsibility. So he has, one of the things that has been found is there is a TCS research in Hyderabad center. So it has nothing to do with IT. It's just a research center. So they have found 31 potential compounds that can be used to treat COVID-19. I'm not sure this is something that has happened 4 weeks before that I have seen. Whether those 31 potential compounds will lead actually to the vaccines will found, but that was something that we got as a newsletter, which we were extremely proud that that our team has been able to successfully find 31 compounds that can be potentially used. We are working with the ICMR, the government, Indian Council of Medical Research, and on this journey. But that is something that has been happening in our Hyderabad labs. So this is nothing IT related. So TCS now does a lot of other things. So other important change of working that we have done at TCS is, something called, which is very, very, very big and which is appreciated all over the world, is we introduced something called SBWS, which is secureless border workforce workplaces. Sorry, secureless borderless workforces. So essentially, we moved our entire organization from the offices to their own laptops or their houses. In some cases, we disbanded. So having a workforce of this size and moving it, completely shutting down is impossible. We thought so actually. So, but it was successfully done. And, to have around 280,000, 300, 3 lakhs, 4 lakhs people, all working from your home environment, but still maintaining all the SLAs across the world, across the projects, across some very, very complex requirements is a kudos. So that has changed over there. Some other important part that has changed is the digital training and the digital capabilities have gone quantum. So we have been able to definitely do some new items, get some lot of digital trainings on big data, the data lakes, the digital tools, the AI part, the bots. So that has been taking a quantum leap. So that has, this has given us the time because, people are able to do that from their safety of their homes. That has taken a leap. So these are some of the few items that we have been doing. We even have a COVID helpline, one TCS channel that was launched. But a lot of other things other than, apart from professional stuff, every other things can be done over there. Cooking skills, guitar lessons, everything can be done over there. That is quite a hot channel in TCS nowadays, the one TCS channel. You had John T. Rhodes coming in and telling us about how to give, a lot of tips. And that was one session I attended. I attended some of the cooking sessions. I personally like cooking. But there are a lot of sessions that go on. So there are ways of working on which the IT workforce has completely been reimagined. We never thought that this is possible, but it is a possible. In fact, there was a plan. I'm not sure whether it is still going to be impacted. There have been some changes where they were thinking that 25% of the workforce, only 25% of the workforce would be required to work from the offices in 2025 for the entire TCS. Whether we are still going ahead with the plan, I have not been sure, but that was something that was being discussed. This is a quantum leap because, that will reduce your infrastructure, it will reduce your traveling time, it will reduce a lot of overhead costs of maintaining those kind of buildings if you are able to work from the security of our homes. It would also give rise to a lot of chances, openings at different places other than the metros or the bigger stations, because if people are able to work, all it will require is a laptop and other things. It would give a potential job openings to lots and lots of smaller towns which are now currently missing the bus. I don't know where TCS is going, but that is something that was a plan. So these are some things that is happening in TCS. I will take a pause. Any specific things you want me to cover in TCS, or anything that you want to see how IT is behaving on this, or any specific pointers you want me to point out?
Yes, Smarjit, I have one small question. It was very impressive to hear from you about your cross-geography career. Okay. What do you think? Which part of your skills or knowledge gave you opportunities to work in so many countries in TCS or anywhere, wherever you worked?
Okay, I will just just give a brief background on this before I go to that, so that people understand what happens in IT. So in IT, we have heard a lot about stuff, traditionally in IT about, what we do. So essentially IT, there are, TCS is a service provider, which is an SI, service integrator is the right word for it. We deal in, project delivery. We do not create the product. The products are often done. We do integrations, we deliver the project and we do that. So in there are four actually quadrants in which we work. One is, technology. So when you talk about technology, it is about, you must be heard about Oracle, SAP, there are different technologies that are there. Java also is, it's an open source technology. We called it, club it as, but that is a kind of language. So technology is above it. So language, those are technology. On top of those technologies, you have functions. So functions is, sales is a function. Customer relationship management is a function. Billing is a function. So these are functions. On top of functions, you get domains. So the billing component will be different for a financial billing doesn't apply. Sorry, let me give CRM. CRM for a telecom customer will be significantly different from a customer service of a banking system, right? So those are domains. On top of domains, you have geos. So a bank that operates in Australia will not be similar to the bank which operates in India, nor will it be similar to one which operates in the South Africa or Mexico even. So those are the domains. If this is the way traditionally you can become a SME or an expert. So somewhere down the line, what happened is, coming back to their answer, is when I moved, I never was in the technology domain. So technology was not my strong point. In fact, I would be among the few guys in TCS who has never touched the system. So I have never touched a system other than doing some functional testing maybe. So I have never developed a line of code, nor do I do that. My function was always as a business analyst to understand. So I started somewhere between those. If you rank is, one is technology, two is, what you can say, two is functions, third is domain. I started somewhere in the functions and the domain part. So I had an understanding of what were the functions we were implementing. I started getting more and more into the domain part. So I came in Synergy. Synergy gave me some sales and compensation incentive experience, and then I walked into domains. So my first posting was in Saudi. So what happens is, the more function and business you start to know, the easier it is to talk to customers. So essentially, customers as a whole normally do not or cannot speak the language of technology. So these mediations often happen at the domain or at the technology, or at the function layer. Function also not, even at the domain and function, more traditionally, you get into the domain. So, and this is where I got some idea, I had some experience. So this was what helped me in, having a, necessary channel of communication with often key stakeholders of the business, because they normally even cannot come to the function layer. They stay at the domain layer. For example, let me talk, when I first went to Saudi. So Saudi has a very, very traditional way of working. You have developers, you have business analysts, they will only talk to the business analyst on the client side. Then above that, you have one of the parts where you have project managers from their side, our project managers, our program managers, engagement managers talking to their senior management. There is no way you can breach protocol. Now, I had a project where I was the only guy and we had a team at offshore. So, and I did not talk technology because I was not very strong in technology. So I started interactions with higher level. In fact, before I was leaving, I was fortunate to talk to the GM of the general manager of the Saudi Telecom, who is like a vice president, or he reports directly to the king. In fact, he is one of the nephews of the king of Saudi Arabia. He owns the Saudi Telecom. So those are all functional discussions. The moment you have a functional discussion, you have a headway or understanding. So when I shifted from, let's say, Saudi Arabia and went to Mexico, this was the cornerstone on which the jump was made. I could understand the functions and the domain. Yes, your soft skills play a role, but the hard language of conversation that is going to happen on the function and domain. And gradually, as I moved into different parts, the geo knowledge came to me, because every geo, every domain, and there is slight changes, but the core knowledge remains the same. The CRM will remain the CRM. If you are able to articulate those across different geos, then you will be able to move. But every geo has a different way of working. When you go more into a sales and management role, you start feeling actually the cross cultural changes will make a bigger impact than any of those other domains. But that was the learning curve. Dilip sir, did it answer your question or did I wander off the track?
Yes. You answered it quite well.
Yeah, Pallavi, I can see that you have a question. Tell me.
Yeah. So my question is specifically in the IT sector, we have to upgrade continuously with the technology. So how you deal with that? Like you have to constantly learn something new coming into the technology. Yeah.
Yes, that is true, Pallavi. You can't, IT, what you are hearing is the tip of the iceberg. Okay. So learning the new technology is often easier part. But that, as I told you, different levels of technology are there. So fortunately or unfortunately, I am not the guy who's a technology specialist. So I know neither Java nor Oracle, so I do not deal at that level. But there are people who have to learn that because those who are more on the development level are learning that. The question that now we are talking about is quantum feats of technology changes. I will give you an example where I have been working for. So in the last big area. So earlier you had data lake and data engineering where we do EDW. I am sure you must have heard all about it. So then we went one science ahead and we have started creating data science. Okay, so data science is like science of the data. You find out insights, a lot of things. What today we are working is a digital twin. So essentially a digital twin, if I define it what we mean over the world in technology, is the digital representation of a physical process. So that is the complex definition of it. The answer to what they're trying to do is even more complex. So there is a production process. Okay. So there is a gas input. They're going to have a gas output. There are going to be some control parameters in there. They want to do a digital representation of it. So they are going to create a digital layer on top of that. Why that is important is it is not possible for you to go inside those gas pipelines and actually measure what is happening. So we have flow meters which are there. So they want to replicate it so that they can have simulations. What they will try is for this production loss, if I have a lesser production, what would be the impact in these pipelines? So these are changes in what you can say. I will go one level up. So I talked about technology where you talked about code and languages. Then you go to this level where you are talking of what you are talking. You are talking of technology innovations. Right? Now I'll give you another example on top of that. 20 years from now, Parikshit sir will get angry with me. Maybe before my generation and maybe he will be there. Banking used to have a completely different way of servicing the customer. SBI still does. I have seen it in my town. But now it has changed. This is changed due to the innovations of technology where your digital has taken a large footprint in BFSI where everything can be done from your mobile app. So this is not an innovation in terms of technology or in the terms of code. It is a transformation in the mindset and the business. So this is where also is a transformation where IT has been brought about. So to put it in a short way, there are always going to be stuff you are going to learn. Whether it can be the technology part is because you are hearing it, the codes are changing. It can happen on a function layer. It can happen on a domain layer. It even can happen in an unimagined layer. You understand? So you will definitely have to learn. So where you will reside at the organization at that time will define what you are going to learn.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
But having said that, Pallavi, there is nothing to worry about. Any organization who's interested and who has that definitely has a very, very strong L&D program embedded in that organization. I have personally worked, different geographies, different places. TCS is one of the greatest L&D platforms that is available. And any organization, I meet some of my friends are there in Accenture. They have strong. L&D is one of the core strengths. If you want your employees to succeed, You have to equip them with the right training and knowledge. So that component is always there.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Yeah. So, that is something on the IT part where, whatever challenges and we are happening. The other thing that you have to understand from an IT, I was telling, just a bit, is typically companies like TCS, Wipro, we started, Infosys, we started as SIs. So SIs is system integrators. So what you essentially do with system integration is there are Oracle products, there are SQL products. So they talk in different languages. You have to sync them up, you have to integrate between them, and you have to make them into a single holistic unit. So we did that, and that is the reason why the 90s boom happened. We took over a lot of stuff. We maintained the system, which was complex. IBM did majority of the implementations. We were doing support. It changed. We started doing implementation. We did transformations. We have done that. Now somewhere down the line, our management and everyone started thinking it is not possible to go into this line. Let us try newer lines. So TTS started doing, may or may not have heard about it. We have started doing products. So TCS has now a lot of products, IP products, which we sell. We get IP of the product and the implementation as well. Tomorrow, if they do not want our services, the product will still get us revenue. So we have gone into products. We have built CRM systems. We have put banking systems. We have put a lot of products, and it is not small, like a tool. It's like an entire suite of products, like a CRM system or like an entire BFSI financial systems. So those products are also there. What we have also worked is we have worked with a coin network, which co-invest. So we are co-investing on new technologies. So together with small, like M-Paisa was something that we did in South Africa, where for mobile, money exchange. So we started that program with a small coin investor, and we built a that M-Paisa where you can have a monetization in telecom. So that was something that was being done. So those are the new sources of revenue. And nowadays we have even gone up, much higher, where we can not only build products, and we are also looking into robotics, where last time we saw a CTO group, which is a technology group. They were giving a robotics demo where we have created a robot on our own lab, where he is able to answer questions, HR queries. So they gave him a very fancy name, I forgot. The other important tool that we have built, and that is a solution that we are trying to push to outside nowadays, is a remote sensing. So you have a wagon going on. So, there is an IoT layer of a drone which is going to fly about it. And from that layer, we are picking up the data from an IoT image. Then there is a data science platform which churns out that image, and you get remote sensing, output saying that, okay, this your wagon is fire and these are the alerts. So this is a huge remote sensing drone network solutions. There was a warehouse drone system where I have personally worked, where the drones can fly in the warehouse. It's a POC we did, never went live. But TCS has gone live in the US with that one. Is where you can go into the network, into the warehouse, a drone will fly. It will not only tell you. We did not use for in some of the advanced countries they are able to do that, where the drones can pick up stuff. This was more for warehouse utilization. So there are spaces in the warehouse where you can utilize. How to find those? So this kind of you have to go to a height and view those to find, okay, there are much spaces. How can the warehouse be optimized, utilized? So drone technology is helping in that. So different new technologies that we are going into. Yeah, I see Abhijit. Yeah, Abhijit, you have a question?
Yes, sir. I have a question related to this business analyst role, right?
Yeah.
And what is the, is it different for different domain? Like I teach operation subject, and so I am asking a specific question about, now recently we changed the name of operation to supply chain and operations. So for those students, what is the scope in project management or IT industry like that, and business analyst role?
Okay, so business analyst is typical business analyst, where I used to work in business analyst or a synergy, has a different meaning. There, what we typically do is try to understand how the business operates, how the business actually operates, and then pen down the requirements. If you go to the IT industry where you are trying to look in a Indian IT especially and trying to look, the business analyst is a very varied function and can typically business analyst has to serve a purpose of understanding what the business wants out of an IT system. Here, the end goal is not to understand how business operates. Okay, so the end goal is for a business analyst to understand how a business can operate. So anyone who understands in supply chain or operations, I have extensively worked in telecom operations and supply chain management, warehouse inventory, and how it happens. So you have a case, let's say Avijit, of warehouse where you are you have a supply chain of fleet of mobile phones which needs to go out X, Y, Z. So somebody wants to there is already a supply chain process in system in this company in Oracle, and they want to better the process. They want to change the logistics in such a way that all the mobile phones delivery will happen within 24 hours. So anyone who buys through their deal period will get the mobile within 24 hours. So they need to do that changes. So what they require is someone to understand this requirement and jot it down in a language which can be translated to IT. So that is the work of business analyst in an IT system. It is not for the business analyst to go and solve how this actually supply chain is going to happen, what would be the number of trucks that is going on, how the replenishment will happen, how the the reverse logistics will kick in. That process they will define. But somebody who needs to sit with them, understand this, and write it in a language which this system people can understand. So that is the work of a business analyst in an IT domain. So anyone who understands supply chain or supply chain operations, he will be able to work in a business analyst role. What you will require is some training on what or some understanding of what the system is currently doing so that you can understand it. So the first layer of your requirement gathering you will be able to do. The next layer is gap analysis, where you need to measure against the system. So you will require some functional understanding of how the system does, or you will require some technical help. So anyone who is working on supply chain operations can go into a business analyst role, and he can definitely work if you understand the principles of how supply chain works.
Okay.
Any specific point? Yeah, Abhijit, any more details you want on that?
No, no, it is sufficient, and I could able to understand this, right? How to relate it with the subject.
Right. If you can relate it, see, that is what is required. What often happens is that, as I told you, that is where you make the impact. Traditionally, IT people who has done Java coding or Oracle people, nothing to demean people or not, they are not worried how business operates. They do not care what problem, how the replacement is going to happen. Now, the business doesn't understand how Java operates. So you are the layer which will explain to the guy, this is what is required from business, this is the documentation, this is how you will do it. So he will do it. He will use the technology, he will get it done. You are just the bridge between him and the business.
One more thing, does they recruit depending upon the types of project that come to you? Like, do you recruit like that?
See, there are two different ways of there are different ways of hiring. What they do is traditionally there is a hiring of freshers or graduates or management guys who are working, and they are all just leaving college. So all those are called new hires. Then there is lateral hires. Lateral hires is when you have people that you need to find specific skills people who is not, currently we are not able to find in our company. So we do lateral hiring. So it will have a completely set of requirements. So the interviews and everything will be focused only on that project. So once you are hired in that project, of course, you will not be let out. You will get different opportunities. But while the hiring of the lateral hire is done, there is always a specific role in mind, and they will ask you specific questions and specific expertise is required to get inside. What will happen is the salary package may be slightly different based on your years of experience or your negotiation of HR.
Okay.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. I see someone else raising a hand, or is it no one? Okay. So basically, I think I have covered something. Now, for next half an hour, we can all, have a discussion on what else do you want to hear from me? What do you want to understand?
Sir, am I audible? Sir, Shruti,
Yes.
Dr. Shruti, yes, sir. So, sir, at IMDR, placement season is going to commence within couple of months. So,
Right.
is there any advice or suggestion from your side for our students? How should they prepare for that?
See, it would depend. Good thing is, I hope you have read that TCS is still going to hire 40,000 guys, new hires this year. So typically, we are still going on a hiring spree. So that is a good news. Yesterday, day before yesterday, I still heard that in our CEO's broadcast. So we are still hiring. We are going to take 40,000 new recruits this year, this calendar year. So from this April to next month. So we are hiring. For hiring, my would be question would be is we need to understand what do you want to get inside, and let me give you practical experiences. When I was there at IMDR is is quite a different experience from what we have done outside or whatever engineering, which gives you the luxury of opening your mind and asking questions, being in a free zone. I did not understand what I wanted. So, to be giving you advice from my experience, majority of the interviews I faced, and I got selected for all interviews I had given. I never got, I cleared the return. I went to the GD and I could not clear the interview simply because my thinking was not clear. I did not know what I wanted. One day I was trying for an HDFC, next day I was trying for a TCS, third day I was trying for a furniture company, fourth day it was a CGPPI. So there has to be clarity on what we want. Then you will be able to frame the questions, you will answer the questions in a better way, and you will be able to show that. Having said that, the golden rule for any interviews that I take, and majority of the interviews that we take, there are three open pointers that I can give. The first thing I check is resistance to change. How open are you for change? Second, how willing are you to learn new things and invest your time on learning new things? Because the reason is, we know that that as a fresher you will not be able to do, but are you willing to give your effort and time to understand and new things? And third thing is, there may be some questions on understanding how your soft skill work, whether you are good in communications, are you able to articulate well. And there are some managers I see who sometimes do a stress test, try to understand how you will react under pressure. Normally for freshers, it is not recommended. We do not do it. It would depend also on the person. But the three things that you will have to understand is clarity of what is required from you, how good are you at articulating, and how open are you for going into new things and opening new stuff, trying to do different things. What will be your effort and commitment level? So those are the few things that are required, because everyone who has gone for any interview or has done any interview knows that in freshers only the attitude and the base knowledge is required. Everything else has to be molded. And I will tell you from my personal experiences, whatever I have learned in any of my educations, I have never used it in my professional career, other than the fundamentals. So that is what my advice would be.
Thank you, sir.
Any other pointers? Yes.
Any questions from the students?
Yes, please feel free. I mean, on any questions that I can help on any hiring, on what you want on IT, what exactly roles are there, what you want to understand, how IT operates.
Hello, sir. This is Vinayak.
Hi, Vinayak.
Sir, I want to know that apart from business analyst in the IT industry, what can operations manager do in the IT sector?
Okay. So when you mean operations manager, can you tell me what exactly operations are you talking about?
Sir, actually, I opted for operations as a major.
Okay.
So in that way, I just want to know.
I understand, but do you have operations experience previously?
No, sir, just 2 months of internship experience.
Okay, so you are a fresher, right? So yes, unfortunately, it will not be any opportunity that you will be given as an operations manager. So the way in which you are inducted to anything is, there are two type of trainees that are inducted. Okay, So one are the engineering trainees who are taken as system engineer trainees. All the other trainees are taken in two categories. Either they are taking as a system analyst trainee or they are taking as a management trainee. So management trainee, typically, be very frank, are from very high prestigious college. Unfortunately, they do not come into and they cannot gel into TCS. So majority of us, when we joined TCS, I joined later on, so I was not a trainee. Join as a system analyst trainee. So when you join as a system analyst trainee, you will be given basic training. Okay. Then in that training period of 3 months, you can articulate your options, saying that I go into the supply chain measure, and you can do. So that is how it will work. Operations manager as a word in IT means completely different. It is someone who manages the IT operations. So that is called operations manager over here. So for example, you have a GE financials. So it has 25 wings. In 25 wings, there are 3 wings which are related to default payment, and recovery of money. Those operations is one operation. So an operation manager manages that operation from you have a system manager and you have a business operations manager. So that is operations in IT.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir.
Yeah. Any other question? That is what used to happen. Parikshit sir will tell, we are last benchers. Very difficult to ask questions. At least in the digital space, we are able to see each other. In the classroom and sitting in the last room, unless asked, very difficult to ask questions.
Smara, while the students are contemplating, there was one thing I wanted to ask you.
Yes, sir.
Coming back to the geopolitical and business paradigm, see, one dependency that is clearly identified as a problem area in India is we are heavily dependent on China for raw materials for manufacture of medicines. The
Right.
pharmaceutical industry is heavily dependent on China for raw materials, and God forbid if things get serious, that is one sector which could be badly hampered. So do you see Australia as an alternative to China in this regard?
No, but what are the, it would also depend on the ingredients that we're looking for. Because typically, I mean, and I maybe stand to be corrected, I do not see, we do not have manufacturer, here. This is all imported from outside. So if
see, Indian pharma industry is capable of manufacturing medicines, but the chemicals that are required.
Right. I got it.
The minerals,
so that's what
the
I'm
salts,
saying. Yeah. So those all can be differently impacted. And what I was trying to just tell is, my father and both all other than me, all are in the medical sector. So I have some understanding of that how the pharma market operates there. And having worked in Wyeth, I feel the question over here is, it is not that it cannot be replaced. It can easily be replaced. The reason that Indian pharmaceuticals operate from China is it is the cheapest. The reason why we operate in that manner is due to, if you understand the way that we operate in pharma industry, is we work in generic products. We never build a product. So when you build a generic product, we are selling it at a much lower rate. If we know any product, any pharmacy industry, just to give an overview of it, if you have a pharmacy company, in the entire lifespan of their entire pharmaceutical companies, they only build 5 or 10 products. That is it. It takes 10 years to get a product into market. So they are, for the first 10 to 20 years, they reap the money out of it and they take all the money. In India, the operation scales are very less. If we are trying to look into other sources, the cost of production and operations may go up, sir. That is the reason, China has that stranglehold because of the cheapness. If that, we have a strategic partnership and we start getting into other things, then it would make it much more cheaper. And that is why the pharma industry, it may also happen, the cost of the medicines and other things may have to slightly go up, because if you do a comparative study, the Indian market is the cheapest in terms of medical care, and that is why medical tourism is happening more and more, because the level of cost and operations we have in medicines is very cheap. In fact, it is the only country where you can survive without an insurance. There is no other place outside where you can survive without a medical insurance. It is not possible. So the cost of operations, Dilip, I think, sir, is the main factor why we need to think very prudently while moving away from China, because the operations, the industry operations, if it goes up, the cost will.
Sir, I'll just add a small rider to this. Of course, cost is a major factor. Parikshit sir, there is another factor which is the quantity and consistency of supply from China. In pharma, it is extremely important.
Right.
It's a continuous
That
process
is true.
operation.
That
True,
is
sir.
It's
true.
a continuous process operation.
That is
Thank
true.
you.
That is definitely a good point, sir. Because those are basically, how it churns out so much, and that is another product. Pharma productivity is completely different from the way these main steel plants are. They are as Dilip sir correctly pointed out, it is more on quality control, more on trials, and more on what you can say, quality factor is the most important criteria there. So that is why the uninterrupted supply chain is very critical over there as well. Anything else?
Students,
Yeah.
anyone has any questions?
That is something, Nilip and Parikshit sir and also Shruti, that I was quite surprised. I have some knowledge about some industries. My core is IT, so I have preferentially worked on 15 or 17 years, whatever, in the IT field. The questions, and I was prepared for more of IT questions. The questions that are coming for is more on other domains and other things. Yes, I have some knowledge of it, but that is not my area of expertise actually. So
That
Sir,
is
we
what
should organize
IMDR does.
another webinar, sir, for that. Definitely. So you have
So-
just given us a clue. So we are going to organize another webinar on.
no, that is not. But as Dilip said, that is what IMDR is always an eye opener. You come prepared, but fortunately, knowing IMDR, I had got some notes. I knew that there will be some floating questions, so that is why I was saved. Otherwise, majority of the questions but it is a good discussion to have, and you understand the space in it. What you do is, and that is what I have gained. The more you live and the more you understand the culture, it is more easier for you to succeed in business or IT or understanding. If you understand the mindset of the people, that is one of the reasons you can gel well with people.
Yes, sir. Right.
Smarjit, one question, or rather a curiosity. You're not an academic, I am aware, but just in case you have come across any discussion there in Australia about the possible changes required in the curriculums to accommodate such kind of situations in future, so that students would be prepared for these kind of VUCA situations. Are they thinking of tweaking or modifying the contents of delivery?
There are two things, sir. One is the course content is definitely going and undergoing a change. The second is the mode of delivery is also undergoing a change. So the course content, they are revising it. In fact, they have already started doing it. So here, like we have our tests, they have their maths Olympiads and maths test. They have the national level scholarship test by which they determine the progress. Just to give a bigger insight here the most important criteria for education is not your knowledge. It is not higher education, for primary education or secondary education till your grade 12 is your years. So if you are 7 years old, irrespective of what you are doing, they will put you in grade 2. If you are 12 years old, irrespective of you studying 10th in India or studying 4th in Africa, they will put you on 12. So your education system is geared in such a way that based on your years of experience, they will do it. So they are a bit more advanced in that. In that, if they see that you struggle, so their entire education is built at different levels. So you can go into a special stream, you can go into a normal stream, you can go into an achiever stream. So based on that, your course content changes, the way in which the course content is delivered changes, the way in which your entire year of schooling is done changes. So there are some modes that are there. In higher education, also they have these different modes of delivery. So it is not impractical here to learn the same course where you want to study, for example, a graduation in economics, and I also want to do a BA, become, and both of us want to do, and based on our knowledge, you may have a separate course instructor and a separate way of operating, and I may also have it. This is something that they, for special courses and other things, that was normally, but now this new way, they are completely going to redesign, is what I was hearing, the way in which it is going to be done and the way it is. And the mode of delivery definitely can change. Mode of delivery can be completely digital. They have the complete infrastructure. In fact, they can work, everyone can work with no change of lifestyle, meaning they rolled it out right away. Everything was operating as normal in digital classes. So the mode of delivery will be more digital now, definitely. Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Yeah. And Dilip sir, I'll also come back to you on this one. Maybe, as an offline chat, we'll discuss this.
Yes.
That is
We'll discuss this. I'm very curious about it.
This is a curious form of thought, meaning I have been working across the world everywhere. Education system in Australia deserves a special mention. It is
I believe
quite
so.
good. So,
hello, sir.
Anything? Yes.
Sir, those of us who want to work in IT sector, so what are the skills that are need to be polished?
So, is it Asutosh I'm speaking to?
Yes, sir.
Okay. So, Asutosh, that's why I said you want to work in the IT sector. What do you want to target yourself as a business analyst, as a project manager, as a developer? You want to do technology? What are your goals?
Sir, actually, I have recently came across a profile name as IT consultant, which most of the companies are hiring right now. So I just needed to have more focus on that.
Okay. Astos, okay. Just one idea that what I am telling again, I'm repeating. Do not go into a mode of IT consultant. Typically, IT consultant is somewhere who has experienced more than 12 years or 15 years. So when you mean an IT consultant, he's supposed to be an SME either in the technology or on the function or on the domain. So that is a consultant. What that simply means is that there is already a problem which they would want you to solve. You understand, right? What typically you are going to go inside, and I assume that before joining IMDR, you do not have prior experience.
No, sir, I am a fresh graduate.
Very good. So you will not have. You will become a trainee. There is no other way around it. If you join any IT company, you will become a trainee or a system engineer or a system analyst. That's an assistant system analyst. So for the first 3 months of your career, you will be given training anywhere. If you join TCS, you will have 3 months training in Kochi or one of the training centers. Nowadays, you have multiple training centers, maybe a digital-based training also. So the first 3 months of your career, you will be given comprehensive training from soft skills to hard skills to Java. And from there, based on your preferences, and that's what I was speaking to Abhijit, if you want to go into operations, you want to go into IT, you want to go into different ways of business, you can pick it up. So when you are preparing for the interview, all you need to have is strong on your basics. So there in how it treats is how TCS typically treats, let me tell you. And this is something that, that has changed over the last 10, 15 years. When we were giving the interviews or before that, the interest was in getting the right candidates. Now, the interest is telling us is to reject the wrong candidates. So now it is not an elimination process, it's a selection process. We want to select more people. Earlier, it was an elimination process where we just wanted to take, 1 or 2 right guys and, eliminate the rest. Here, we want to select more and more. So the only question that they would ask you is, since you do not know IT, how good are you in the stuff that you are already doing? That will establish the mindset of your successor criteria. Suppose you are doing marketing. So you are studying marketing, right? So can you answer if you answer questions on marketing? They would not expect you to answer questions, that is IT related. So they will ask you basics question on marketing, other items. The more is communication, it is on what currently you are doing and some hypothetical situations they will understand. So, if you are going for a test in any IT company, I'm sure there will be written where they will look into analytics, your CAT, prepare like CAT, those kind of questions, your skill sets they will check. After that, there is an interview or a GD. GD would be on something. An interview, it is more of whether you are strong in your basics, how confident you are, and what are your communication skills. Your communication skills are your key to success. How good are you in articulating?
Okay, sir. Thank you.
Yes. So don't go worry about, don't look into profile, don't do anything. Just be yourself and you will get it. Just, basically, but you should be able to answer questions about yourself. So what are your 4 strengths? And those meanings, it may look from your side as very simple questions, but for the interviewer who understands how to go inside, that will give you a Pandora box. I can open up anything if I get 4 sentences from you. So if you are doing that, you should be always be ready for a follow-up questions. If you tell my weakness is this, be ready for the follow-up question. And then a follow-up question. If you are prepared that way, you will be able to answer all the scenarios. That is my advice to you. That is what I have learned on both sides of the interview process, giving these interviews and taking these interviews.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Sir, thank you for the great session, first of all. And I know you have explained it where, we would have to join as a trainees first. But talking about my personal experience, I have IT experience. Not core IT, but yes, I have worked as GIS analyst, and now I'll be pursuing marketing as my specialization. So, what different role I should look for if we talk about an IT company?
What was your previous one? What analyst you were working as?
GIS, Geographical Information System Analyst.
Okay. See, I will tell you.
And I have 2 years of experience, 2.5.
Yeah. So what it will do, Shruti, to be 2 things. One, you may, if your experience is found relevant, your pay scale and other grades will be separate. Apart from that, the work that will happen is we are doing a lot in that geography and geospatial region. We are doing a lot of domain. So you may get your first, project or your domain tag. So essentially all employees are tagged to domains. That is how TCS operates. So, or any IT company operates. Either the domain can be telecom, or vertical can be technology. And then you have verticals and you have horizontal. So the verticals are domains. So the ISUs, which can be telecom, BFSI, can be digital is a domain which has been created, and you have technologies. So you will be placed in that vertical. In that role, what project, what roles you will get will define on your aptitude. It can be business analyst, it can be a functional lead, it can be a business consultant. It would depend on the requirement of that project. And if you are really good in that area and you are an SME who can not only answer questions but can predict how the business can do, you can move to the COE or the center of excellence of those areas, and they will use you for creating and enabling different solutions that we may be building. It would depend on what your knowledge and you will be able to contribute. But GIS as a domain, we definitely have a lot of projects going on. So you will be able to find yourself in one of those projects. Make sure that when you're joining and when you're having your training, you articulate it correctly to the concerned persons. But your relevant experience will definitely be used.
All right, sir. Because I was a bit worried because, I have chosen a field which is not related to IT, which my experience, lies in. So,
no, but what is going to happen, Shruti, is you are going to land on the other side of the table. Okay, so we are not the persons who are going to own GIS solutions. What we are going to do is, so essentially you are using some system in a GIS solution, right? If you remember, whatever you're doing. Now you are the one who will provide the solutions to the Shruti who is sitting over there. You are coming on the other side of the fence. So you will still be working on the GIS area, but you will not be working as a user. You will be the one who will be providing the solution to the user. You're going to come to the other side of the table. You understand?
Yes, sir.
But for wherever
It's
you
fine.
sit, wherever you sit on the table, you still have to understand the GIS concept. So that is why your strength is where will lie. Because for me to go into GIS, I do not know the basics of GIS. You already know the basics of GIS. It will help you.
Okay. Thank you so much, sir. Thank you. Thank you for this.
Thank you, sir. It's my immense pleasure to present vote of thanks. I, Aarti, on behalf of Deccan Education Society, IMDR, would like to thank you, sir, for giving us time and enlightening us on the impact of COVID-19 in Western Australia. Sir, your session was very insightful as we move towards embracing the new normal. We got an overview of the impact of COVID-19 in Western Australia and how the country is dealing with the pandemic. We gained perspective on the advancement of the country in terms of innovation and Australia-China socio-economic partnership. We also gained knowledge as to how mining and education and technology propels the economy. We understood about the aspects affecting oil and gas industry. So we gathered that in order to articulate, one needs to have thorough knowledge about domains and functions. We also understood how workplace being reimagined and willingness to learn is the key to progress. Surely this will help and guide us in our future endeavors. Thank you so much, sir. I would also like to thank our director, faculty, non-teaching staff for continuously encouraging and supporting us for such corporate connect. I thank the entire student organizing team. I thank all my student colleagues without whom the session wouldn't have been successful. Thank you so much.
Thank you, guys. It was a very great session.
Thank you so much, sir.
Smarjit,
Thank you,
special
Smara. It
thanks.
was lovely connecting with you once again after so many years.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Next time I'm in Pune, definitely I'll be able to try to visit IMDR. It is really close to our hearts. Whatever success we have gained, this institution, played a very, very big role in terms of understanding, and enlightening us. So the sessions that we used to have over there, at that time it did not mean much. But now coming, at this stage of life, we understand, the fundamental mindset change happened in this institution. So it's very close to our hearts. Whoever is an IMDRite, I'm sure will stay an IMDRite for life. It was great to reconnect with all of you. Hopefully, some of the points that we discussed will have some impact somewhere. My only advice to you is, when we are going for any interviews, any jobs, my 2-3 pointers: always do some research on the organization, how it works like. Some of the interviewers are quite egoistic. If you have time, spend, when someone is coming, if you can look up that person, do some background of LinkedIn and everything, and you don't tailor to that, don't reserve to that, but some of your answers, if they hit those things, the person to person connect is very critical while going out and succeeding in an interview. That is what I have learned. Second, always be strong in your basics. So you have to know what what you have told on your CV or what you are going to tell. Suppose you try to tell that I'm very good in logistics, I'm very good in supply chain, I'm very good in finance, I'm very good in sales compensation. Immediate question will give us how sales compensation can be improved. Be prepared on whatever you are saying. You should have confidence on. And third important point: be open and transparent. Your willingness to work hard and your openness to change are the biggest two attributes you can bring to any organization. If you are, open and ready to work in any environment and provide value, that is all the organization is looking for you as a fresher. So those are the 2-3 points that I would take. Otherwise, I am sure, it is all about one's ability, and I'm sure all of you will succeed. Maybe in 15 years or 20 years of time, you would have progressed much more than what we have done. So best of luck. And have a great career ahead.